Hey, welcome to another session of the Phoenix Congress. Today is April 20th. It's 420. And so we've got to do an episode about the second of our three planks, ending mass incarceration. The blueprint for a better America. We're going to end poverty, end mass incarceration, end the endless wars. And, as somebody who lives here in New Hampshire, I've had the privilege of seeing a lot of great candidates for president over the years. This year I got to meet Cory Booker. One of the greatest things about his plans to end mass incarceration was to use the power of the pardon to release thousands and thousands of prisoners. Now, we have a huge problem with mass incarceration in America, but the vast majority of them are incarcerated by the states and not the federal government. So the president is somewhat limited in what he can do with his pardoning powers. But Cory Booker, his goal was to release 17,000 prisoners and work his way up from there to establishing a sentencing review board, and really he was really committed to ending mass incarceration. And so those are great ideas. We can build on those. We can do better and implement some 21st century solutions. Ending mass incarceration, it's the first duty in the Preamble is to establish justice. For anything else, establish justice. And we are failing. We're failing as Americans. When more than 2 million men and women, fathers, brothers, mothers, sisters, daughters, when they wake up behind bars every single morning, 2 million Americans, we are failing. We have failed to establish justice. Let's do better. We can do it. And one of the biggest places to start is by ending the drug war. The drug war has been a failure. And this idea that we can sort of incarcerate our way, that we can punish people into submission, that's not the American way. What is it that millions of school children and people pledge every day, pledge allegiance to the flag with liberty and justice for all? We are failing to do that. We could do better. So on 420, yes, definitely legalize marijuana. A lot of states, my neighbor to the south, Massachusetts, has legalized it. And I've made trips down there for recreational marijuana. Legalizing it is a great first step, right? To stop putting new people in jail. But for those who've already been victimized by the criminal justice system, we need to expunge those records and make it easier for them to move past what we now recognize they probably shouldn't have had to move past anyway. I think I said that right. Taxing, regulating is a much better solution. It's the same better solution that we used for alcohol prohibition. Some 10,000 people died during alcohol prohibition from drinking alcohol that was impure, that was wood alcohol instead of grain alcohol. And on one hand, you could just say, oh, sorry, should have followed the law. But we could do better. And you know how many people died last year from drinking wood alcohol? I don't know, because it was a pretty small number. We can take that same tact with the war on drugs. Do you know how many people died last year from heroin overdoses? Because sometimes it's cut with like fentanyl or elephant tranquilizers. We can do better by legalizing it and regulating it so people know what they're getting. So people are confident in the purity and the quality of the product that they're buying. Now, please don't misunderstand this as an endorsement of drug use. Okay? Especially as a parent who's raising kids, I'm not endorsing drug use. However, I'm recognizing that I've done it, that other people have done it, that I don't know what the statistics are. 100 million Americans say they've smoked marijuana, tried marijuana. I mean, the thing is about mass incarceration is that while there's millions and millions of criminals, the people who get arrested, the people who get prosecuted, the people who get incarcerated are disproportionately people of color. About 10 years ago, Michelle Alexander wrote this book, The New Jim Crow, and I was rereading it recently. She was talking about Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and how back in the 80s, 90s, there was a real effort to crack down on drunk driving. Numerous states now have some type of mandatory sentencing for this offense, typically 2 days in jail for a first offense and 2 to 10 days for a second offense. Possession of a tiny amount of crack cocaine, on the other hand, carries a mandatory minimum sentence of 5 years in federal prison. We have a duty to establish justice, and that's not it. We can do better. The drug war is rooted in racism. So we can tax it, we can regulate it. On the crack cocaine thing, Cory Booker has tried to eliminate the disparity in sentences between crack cocaine and powdered cocaine. When I served in the state legislature here in New Hampshire, I introduced legislation to do the same thing. Got it through the House, couldn't get it through the Senate. The drug war is rooted in racism. And we can move past that. We can rise above that. We can humanize people instead of demonizing them. And by taxing it and regulating it, one of the models that we use in New Hampshire when we regulate things oftentimes is we set fees at 125% of their costs. So if we're going to legalize, say, marijuana, whatever the cost of regulation of hiring people to supervise, to oversee quality, ensure that or people are checking IDs and all that kind of stuff, whatever those costs are, plus money for the societal costs, for the treatments, for the rehabs, for the things like that, whatever all those costs are, we set the regulatory fees at 125% of that, so that society comes out ahead. We get to keep the difference after paying for all those costs of drug use. Drug use is not harmless, but the harm that it causes is minimal compared to the harm caused by drug prohibition. So, just like alcohol prohibition didn't work, drug prohibition doesn't work either. A couple years ago, 2018, there was a national prison strike, and prisoners were arguing for a number of reforms. And so we've incorporated most of those in the Blueprint for a Better America, including rescinding the Truth in Sentencing Act and Sentencing Reform Act. Mandatory minimums are also a huge part of the reason our prison population has exploded. When people get locked up for horrific amounts of time over small things. And so mandatory minimums need to be abolished. We've taken discretion away from judges and tied their hands in the name of getting tough on crime. And while that's certainly politically popular, when you're running for office and you're trying to make constituents afraid, make them feel like there's a problem that only you can solve, getting tough on crime is one of the ways to do it. But what might be good for your re-election in the past is not good for society. And so the Phoenix Congress and the American Union want to flip that around. We want to make it so that humanizing people instead of demonizing them is good for your odds of re-election. That ending mass incarceration improves your chances of winning. As a parent, my thoughts on establishing justice in my own household and raising my kids, my views have changed over the years. And in a couple ways. One, as I've tried to educate myself and about what works and what works, as I've observed for myself which sort of punishments are effective, and I guess third, as I've seen what other parents do or don't do and observe the results in their children. So states are sort of laboratories for democracy, right? So we have a good amount of data on how we can rehabilitate, not exterminate mankind. I'm quoting the New Hampshire Constitution there, with our prisons. We can. So some of the additional demands of the 2018 prison strike that are included in the Blueprint for a Better America are restoring access and increasing access to rehabilitative services for all prisoners, restoring access to Pell Grants, and ending restrictions on voting. Most European countries, like Germany, they encourage incarcerated citizens to vote, to participate in democracy, even while they're incarcerated, because that's how society works. Is when everybody's kind of on the same page, and so you want all Americans to be part of this process. When the Iowa caucuses were going on, I learned that Iowa is, I believe, the only state that disenfranchises felons for life. For life. That there are 52,000 people in Iowa that are permanently barred from voting under the current law. That's not democracy, right? This is the license plates in D.C. that say, taxation without representation. This is what we fought the War of Independence for 240 years ago. And yet somehow it's okay to tax formerly incarcerated Americans, but deny them the opportunity to elect their own representatives. No, it's not okay. Part of establishing justice is to end restrictions on their voting. We also need to go back and we need to look at and question any profit motives in the prison industrial complex. Incarceration is always going to be a small necessary function of government, but it doesn't have to be for profit. It doesn't have to put money into people's pockets. Incarceration is a failure of society. When I have to punish my children, like if I would have to send them to the room or ground them, whatever, then that's a failure as a parent. And so the goal is to make sure that my kids don't reoffend, not to just lock them in their rooms for months, for years at a time, just to make sure that they don't break the rules. That's not good parenting. That's not raising kids to be productive members of society. So we can do better. We can do better. We will do better under the Blueprint for a Better America. The first part of the blueprint is of ending poverty, where every American will get an American Union job, $300 a week. And so Andrew Yang, when he was campaigning here in New Hampshire for president, he talked about how he planned 1 year from today to be high-fiving all the people that he pardoned on their way out of jail on 4/20/2021, and promising them the freedom dividend, $1,000 a month, as an incentive to rehabilitate. And so we could do a little better than that. $300 a week is $1,300 a month. When people have economic security, they are much less likely to commit crimes, to go out and steal to try and make ends meet. It's one of the reasons that childhood poverty costs society over $1 trillion a year, is the costs of crime. So let's take away the economic reasons for that by ending poverty, giving everyone an American Union job. One of the other hurdles, one of the other problems with our system of criminal justice is the probation parole system. And it's really a maze of landmines. I was talking to a friend the other day who, her roommate is a formerly incarcerated person, and when he got out, he can't get his driver's license until he pays his fines. Trying to find a job so he can pay his fines is tricky. And here in New Hampshire, the car is pretty essential to being able to travel through most of the state. We put a lot of roadblocks in place, going all the way back to Bill Clinton in the 1994 crime bill. Yeah, we can do better. We want people to succeed. We want people to thrive. And mass incarceration is not the way to do that. It's a moral imperative, especially now with COVID-19. People in prison don't have the same access necessarily to soap and water and masks and things like that. And when we incarcerate someone, when we as society say, you are so dangerous that we are going to have to lock you up, then we have a responsibility to make sure that their basic needs are met. And I read today about a prison in Ohio where 70% of the population tested positive for COVID-19. That's not justice. We're failing to establish justice. We can do better together. So there's a lot of issues. The amount of horror stories of injustice that exists, it's just mind-numbing. Can't really think of a better phrase than that. The Mississippi Supreme Court recently upheld a 12-year sentence for a man who possessed a cell phone in a jail cell. And the judge had the audacity to say, well, you're lucky we didn't give you 15 years. Here's the thing, though. When he was arrested and brought in on a misdemeanor charge, they didn't take his phone away. And later, when he asked his jailer, hey, can you charge my phone for me? They said, you've got a phone? Bang, you're going to jail. We're going to charge you with a felony. And it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous that father of three has been sentenced to 12 years in prison because nobody took his phone away, and when he had it in the jail cell, it's so ridiculous. And there are so many cases like this. We can do better. We can do better. And the place to start is by committing to ending mass incarceration, by accepting the duty to establish justice that's in the preamble of the Constitution, and working together, forming a more perfect union, an American union, and voting the American Union slate this November. So I hope you'll join the union, join the next Fast for Peace on the 15th, and you can find more information on the website, phoenixcongress2020.com. Till next time, I'm the Gandhi guy. #Fast for Peace. Just keep walking.